Hey, it's Nikki, and today's episode is a special series called In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact with my friends from Borshoff. I am a huge fan of the work Borshoff does to advance internal communication, and so happy that they have joined Gut Plus Science for a special series. Get ready for internal communication inspiration. There's so many nuggets of wisdom here.
Hey everyone, welcome to In the Loop, Communicating for Maximum Leadership Impact. I'm Katherine Coble, your host, and I'm really excited to bring you this monthly series that explores how you, as a leader, can become a better communicator. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. Lately, the news has been full of announcements from large companies stating that they're going to start requiring employees to report to a physical office location, effectively ending the days of fully remote work. Some are claiming that productivity is down, that collaboration isn't happening, or they're giving other reasons why they think workers need to come back into the office. Well, regardless of whether you believe working on-site or remote or even hybrid is the best way to work, the reality is that the traditional office workplace, it really is forever changed. Some form of hybrid or remote working is here to stay. And we as leaders should embrace it and figure out how to make it work well. According to a new Gallup poll of workers who have remote-capable jobs, the trend of remote work flexibility is continuing to hold constant. A little more than half of all employees with remote-capable jobs are working what is considered a hybrid schedule, with some days in the office and other days at home every week. In the most recent study, the number of workers who work exclusively remote has stayed relatively constant this past year at about 27%, which means that for those employees who have remote-capable jobs, only 21% are working on site every day. So, if almost 80% of our workforce is working one or more days a week from home, there's a potential for them to feel isolated or disconnected, or for there to be a communication breakdown that really just leaves them confused or out of the loop. Now, what's interesting is that this trend of working from home has been in place since COVID struck back in March 2020, which means for 4 years, managers have been responsible for managing team members that aren't in the office. But despite that length of time, 70% of managers say they've had no training in how to manage a hybrid workforce. Further, the study shows that if managers could only do one thing to boost engagement of their hybrid teams, it would be to provide meaningful feedback. In other words, communicate. Today, I want to share with you some ideas on how to communicate better with your employees who are remote or hybrid, and how you can encourage them to communicate better with each other. Even with all the technology that we have available to us today, leaders are sensing a breakdown in communication that is leading to confusion, frustration, and just low engagement for employees. So today, I've got 3 big ideas for you that I think can help you improve your leadership communication with your hybrid or remote team. Communication breakdowns often occur between leaders and managers, but they also occur between managers and employees and between team members directly. And while many of these ideas are focused on you as the leader, they can also help your managers and other employees when you model them. The first big idea feels pretty basic, but so many of us just don't do it well, and that is run your meetings effectively. Most leaders are the ones initiating meetings, whether it's team meetings, maybe special project meetings, or all employee meetings. Regardless of the purpose of the meeting, it's an opportunity to communicate effectively. And with just a little bit of intentionality, you can make it work so much better than most meetings do. Now, we often complain about meetings, and the research bears out that meetings just are really a dreaded part of many workers' lives. Employees often say that meetings are a waste of time, they're unproductive, and downright boring. But here's the thing. Meetings can be one of our most effective tools for connecting with our employees. We just have to do a better job of making them work well. And the first rule of running a good meeting is to have an agenda. Force yourself to think through the content of the meeting, and that will tell you if you even need to have the meeting in the first place. It'll also give you a framework that you can follow to be sure that the meeting doesn't go off the rails or that it doesn't leave others confused or frustrated. Now, ensuring that you have a strong, specific agenda helps whether the meeting is in person, online, or hybrid. But in the instances when the meeting has some or all of the attendees on a virtual connection, it just becomes even more important. Following an agenda actually could decrease the meeting time by up to 80%, and who doesn't love to get out of a meeting early? But studies show that only 37% of meetings typically have an agenda. Now, one thing we hear from our clients often is just how difficult it is to run a meeting with a portion of the team in the office and another portion online. In these kinds of situations, it's critical to consider the experience for everyone, but especially for those employees joining online. Think through the barriers that they might have to participation. Often, the people in the room will dominate the conversation, and it becomes difficult for the person online to participate or even just to cut in with something to say. To help alleviate this issue, set some ground rules at the beginning of the meeting. You may tell everyone that when it comes to the Q&A time, or everyone starts to share updates, you'll start with the online participants first and call on each one individually to contribute. You may also encourage the online participants to actively use the chat function or the raise your hand feature or other features that many of these video conferencing services have built in. The key, though, is to make sure that someone on the team is tasked with watching for the cues from those online so that they can interject on their behalf and draw them into the conversation. Now, talk to this person ahead of time and ask them to act as the online host and explain to them that their role is to help ensure a good online experience for those who are joining from other locations. Another thing to keep in mind is the use of whiteboards or other physical items in a room that online participants might not be able to see. One fix for this is to just put any notes on a digital whiteboard, and that's easily seen by the online participants, but it can also be projected into the room. It's actually a better way to save any notes for later reference as well. Now, a lot of these video conferencing programs have these sorts of things built into them already. It's also important in these types of meetings to keep all cameras on and to watch for body language of those online. Your online host can be watching for these signals and just use them to call on people or otherwise help clarify what's going on by offering context, adding links into the chat, or just reinforcing in other ways. Lastly, during any hybrid meeting, be sure that you stop the conversation occasionally to check for understanding, including calling on those online participants to be sure that they've had a chance to voice any questions that they have or any concerns. Now, all of this will help you run a more effective meeting, but it's also going to help build trust and really some appreciation from the online participants. The second area where you can really make a difference in your communication with hybrid or remote employees is through very specific, intentional experiences that you create for those employees. Now, if you have a remote employee reporting to you, having a structured, regular check-in with that person is critical. All managers should be having one-on-one meetings with their direct reports anyway. It's just good people management. But when the employee is remote, it's important to make sure that the time is well spent since you may not have as many interactions throughout the week with them. This way, they know they'll have an opportunity to hear from you and to be heard. And for those times in between your scheduled check-ins, be sure your employees know you are available to them. If your calendar feels too full or they rarely see or hear from you outside of a scheduled team meeting or one-on-one, they're not going to feel empowered to reach out when problems come up. Consider scheduling some office hours and letting your team know that you have availability to chat and to connect without a scheduled appointment if they need to reach out. There's other ways that you can also be very intentional in your communication with your hybrid or remote employees, and also encouraging more communication between team members. It might be in the form of leading a structured conversation among the whole team. Doing this on a regular basis by encouraging people to get together and to discuss team goals, personal strengths, or just other topics that are important will help them get to know one another better. Now, if you have a group of employees who are fully remote, consider creating a virtual team and encourage that group to get together to share ideas, to check in with each other, and just encourage each other with tips or tricks that they've found to help them be more productive and to connect with other team members. While you may be completely committed to remote or hybrid work, it's also important to consider what your strategy is for in-person events. Connection is crucial, and regardless of how you feel about remote versus in-office work, studies consistently show that in-person interactions strengthen those team connections. Some leaders plan for fully remote teams to get together in person once or even a few times every year. If this is a strategy that you're going to take, just be sure that you make the most of the in-person time, not by stuffing it with workshops and team meetings, but with a balance of unstructured time where employees can spend some time together over meals, celebrating things, or just other activities that help them connect. Remember, too, that the best way to really understand what will help employees connect is just to ask them. Back in late 2020 at my firm, we were trying to determine what our future work arrangements would be as we saw some of the companies in our area starting to bring people back into the office. We talked to our employees to gather some feedback, and while a great number of them really wanted to keep working from home, I'll never forget this one conversation that I had. One of our mid-level employees who had been with us for several years said, "If we decide to go 100% remote, a piece of my soul will die." It was a statement that really struck me because this individual was pretty introverted, and while she was a great team player, she loved to just put her head down and get work done. Now, as her supervisor, I realized that I couldn't just make an assumption about her preference. I had to ask her. Even our introverted colleagues desire connection and social support in the workplace, so we have to figure out what that right balance is for everyone. Now, my last recommendation to you is to think through all the channels you have available to communicate through and maximize each one according to its strengths. In a past episode about communicating well with generations, I shared with you that most organizations aren't fully utilizing the technology to reach their employees as well as they could. An example of this is mobile apps. Some recent studies show that 70% of employees keep their phones within eye contact while working. But almost 60% believe that their organization has been way too slow at adopting apps and other mobile-friendly platforms for employee communication. This is a missed opportunity to use a communication tool that gives you fast access to your employees and is actually appreciated by many employees. Now, in terms of tools, video is another one that leaders can use to their advantage. Instead of sending all staff messages through email or chats all the time, consider which topics might be better communicated through a short, informal video message. Is it bad news? Sad news? Maybe it's good news. With video, you can express more emotion and you can share more of a human connection than you could through a written message. And your video doesn't have to be scripted or overly produced. Keep in mind, we're in the age of TikTok, and simple, authentic video messages really resonate with people more than slick corporate videos. A word of caution, though. Make sure you've prepared for your video by thinking through what you want to say and making sure that your background, the sound quality, and other technical details are considered. You want to be sure that the quality of the video is good and that your message isn't lost just because there's some sort of a distraction or a poor quality issue. Now, another channel that you can use for internal communications is actually social media. I know you may be thinking that this is an external channel, but if you take a look at your social media channels, chances are you'll find that many of your employees are following them, and they're a great place to share information so long as it's not proprietary or to celebrate employees and just reinforce your company culture. Using a mix of communication channels will help you reach everyone, and it will also help you reinforce that message. Now, no matter what channel you use, just be sure to think about the tone that you're setting and the words that you're using. Preparation is always key to good communication. This is where a communication coach can be a big difference for you by helping you think through and practice that communication. Now, as I close today, I want to encourage you. If you lead people, you must love people. A recent Gallup poll shows that as many as 1 in 5 employees experience loneliness in their work. They don't feel connected to their coworkers, their managers, or their work. Getting back in the office isn't necessarily the solution to this. Having connected relationships is really the solution. And you, the leader, are the one to model and encourage that through communication. Take steps today to stay connected to your employees. Keeping them in the loop is so much more than just sharing information. It's about making them part of something bigger than themselves. And that's what leadership is all about.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.